Welcome to the Robert Lowell Memorial Lecture and Reading. The donors and I decided to subtitle this series "In the Spirit of Room 222." Across the street at 236 Bay State Road, in Room 222, the distinguished poet Robert Lowell taught a writing class. Rosanna Warren and Ha Jin and Leslie Epstein and Louise Glick and I still teach the writing seminars in that room. And in Lowell's class, the students at BU included Sylvia Plath, George Starbuck, and Anne Sexton. And the spirit of the room, as we are interpreting, is that although in the academic context, Lowell was the professor, he was the teacher, and Plath, Sexton, and Starbuck were the students. In the world of art, we're just quarters of excellence. In the world of art, everybody's trying to write the best thing they can and learn how to write it as well as they can. So in that spirit, in this series, we have a recent alum of the BU MFA program give a very brief reading and introduce our distinguished visitor. And I'm very happy that one of the best living poets, Henri Cole, is our distinguished visitor. He'll be introduced by Sara Peters, and I'll say just a little bit about Sara, who has, for the last couple of years, had a Stegner Fellowship in Stanford. Those of you in writing know how hard they are to get, how very desired they are. Sara has published poems in Poetry Daily, Room, the Threepenny Review, and I think she is a very good match to be reading with Henri and introducing him. Her work, like his, embodies two good things that are very good to put together: candor and imagination. Candor and imagination. I believe that Sara, in the coming years, will publish a book of poetry, and it will be a very good book of poetry. Sara Peters.
Can everyone hear me? Is the mic at the right height? Okay. I am extremely happy to be here, and I want to thank Robert and Becca and everyone else who helped this happen. I feel very lucky, and I feel very honored to be introducing Henri Cole. So I will read 5 poems, and that will be it. The first is called Playing Lesbians. In my dreams, I am a moral child, and whence I tire of performing my idiosyncrasies, my babysitter and I are somewhere still sinking into a dimpled couch under a misremembered painting, playing lesbians. There was what I was, and then there was what I seemed to be becoming. I love this gory business, I kept thinking, as I watched, with the eye that wasn't pressed into the couch, the wind shunt one of her hairs over the hardwood floor, and heard a sudden rain begin, silvery and short, barely enough to wet an umbrella. Some omissions are so extravagant, they become adornment. With August over and linden trees no longer buzzing emporiums, in front of my parents she licked an eyelash off my cheek, for scrapbooking, for luck. And my parents made sounds that groped towards laughter. I watched her pull on her scalloped shoes, each heel so high her steps like needlepoint, bright dust beneath each brow's cathedral arch, my face swept for a second by one of her thousands of polished rococo ringlets, as, for and since it was my birthday, she fastened gold chains to my ankles and wrists. The second poem is called Mary Ellen's Spook, and to give it more context and make it more interesting, it's based on this story, which is that in 1922, a farming couple living close to where I grew up in Nova Scotia adopted a young woman named Mary Ellen. And soon afterwards, strange things began to happen. and by strange things I mean poltergeist-esque things. Mary Ellen Spook. As a teenager, there are several ways to get your parents' attention. Only one of these ways is to set things on fire with your mind. But Mary Ellen was unaware of the alternatives. Had it not been 1922, had she been born yesterday, she could have banged out a career like Sylvia Browne. Book jackets bright as tinfoil, rosy quartz, incantatory moaning set to jambes. Had it not been Nova Scotia, she could have joined a circus, called herself Isis, read hibiscus, cut a fringe, fucked a few dogs when the seekers slowed their seeking, maybe a fling with a Siamese twin, growing out of the ringmaster's chest. But what she lacked was access. No books, no movies, no newspaper even. The closest thing to freakish, the francophone farmhand with his black cigarettes and black coffee. She didn't mean to braid the horses' manes and tails hundreds of times with so much elan, French four-stranded, but up was the only unoccupied direction, and how else to get there? Only these questions and the pursuing non-answers. Who set those fires? Who broke those mirrors? Is that your blood? One morning, the china cabinet doors flew open of their own accord, and teacups floated out in a straight line, doing a little turn at the end of their journey, like runway models. This time, Mary Ellen hadn't even been there throwing her big wet mind around. Instead, she'd been standing at the edge of the property, where the plow always turned back. Her neck was bent like a medieval mandolin. When the priests and parents approached, already bloody from pushing through raspberry bushes, she understood both what she had started and that she would not stop. 3 left. The title and first line of this next one are the same. I understood our time was running out, so I planned a winter picnic and privately decided not to eat. We drove past petrified trees. Thankfully, we passed a cyclist with prayer cards woven through his spokes, and he provided talk until we reached the cove. You spread a collapsed cardboard box over seagrass blown the wrong way, while I unpacked my obvious fruits and vegetables, pomegranate, artichoke heart, cherry. Some people bag the first head they see. I'd chosen lettuce as carefully as a ball gown comparing ruffles. But soon we were noting a summer A-frame, nodding our emptying heads, and as if at a chess game, we stared at the square foot between us. Soon I'd try on your glasses, you'd play with my lighter, a few feet away foam came off the water and dolloped the rocks, and a plastic doll torso was 8 waves away from arriving, armless, legless, sucked and beaten clean. The second last is called Rehearsal. I am walking through water with one of my sisters, the river banked with tiger lilies, the sun like having a lemon juiced into your eye, our senile dog, ecstatic, forgetful, ecstatic, behind us, and I am yammering about my discovery, a chest-deep pool sentried by trees that caterpillars were killing with their yearly carnival tents. We reach, then ruin the pool with oils and shampoos. We scrub too much skin from our heels, then debate whether to sunbathe naked. That is, who is hiding in the woods. We joke so long and rough, the joke morphs, till we're practicing for our future rapes. We both have numbers that we know are up. My sister's ears are speared with porcupine quills and steel, but she's placed her straw hat carefully over her stomach. As she talks, I watch, while dragonflies and other less showy insects land on her burning shoulders. The dragonflies present their stenciled wings. I can't remember what the others do. My sister spits to clean each sunglass mirror. She wants me to hear how, when it happens, she'll do this scream. But when the scream comes, it's just like she's opened a shaken bottle of sparkling water. I am speechless only for the view of her throat's cushioned corridor. But when the scream ends, her eyes have broken off from the rest of her face. She takes our green net bag full of oranges and slams it down on the baking rocks, beating the ground till the oranges soften and streak the air with the smell of their breaking. I'm so happy I have not fallen down yet. I was expecting to. And the podium isn't even shaking too much. This is the last poem I'll read before I introduce Henri Cole. It's called Your Life as Lucy Maud Montgomery. To give it context, I love the Anne of Green Gables series, and when I was writing this poem, I imagined Anne Shirley, Anne of Green Gables, pardon me, being held, or rather holding Lucy Maud Montgomery, the author, hostage, and trying to control the direction that the books went in. Excuse me. And it begins with a quote from Ella Montgomery's journal, which is, as a rule, I am very careful to be shallow and conventional where depth and originality are wasted. You love this orphan. Many people do, but your love's more advanced. You wrap her in silk like a fly, weave wet, bristling flowers into her hair, you asshole. You love this orphan, and around her you breathe as if on a mountaintop, the sun in the process of bending a rainbow behind your head. You love this orphan. You lie in bed, rubbing your dry feet together, thinking of the way she comes to you, requesting puffed sleeves, scholarship money. You'd write off World War I for her. You would, except she has you noting in this silly journal, indigo tassel, pagoda watermark, that she wants to marry a left-handed Aries and be dropping babies by next week. Soon she'll snip each braid and store it under glass. She'll rope off her bedroom and charge $25 at least for a look at her eyelet pillowcases. You love this orphan, you dickhead, but she's carrying a butterfly knife, although you agreed last week to keep the gables green. You love this orphan, many people do, but your love's not advancing, and she follows you to restaurants, looking tame as a doily in her pinafore. But she stuffs your mouth with styrofoam peanuts and places her knife on the thinnest skin you own. That's it. Henri Cole was born in Japan and raised in Virginia. His 8th book of poems, Touch, comes out this month from FSG. He is the recipient of, among other honors, the Lenore Marshall Poetry Prize, a Lambda Literary Award, the Kingsley Tufts Award, the Rome Prize, the Berlin Prize, several Massachusetts Book Awards, and his 2004 collection, Middle Earth, was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. He has been the recipient of fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts, the Guggenheim Foundation, and the American Academy of Arts and Letters. Please understand that this list of honors and prizes is not complete by any means. I feel it would take me about a week to detail the many ways in which Mr. Cole has been honored for his astonishing work. Harold Bloom has called him a master poet with few peers and a central poet of his generation. In her review of Pierce the Skin selected poems, Rosanna Warren wrote, relying neither on traumatic anecdote nor on ostentatious materiality of language, Cole marries verbal rigor to disciplines of memory and observation. The result is a poetry formidable in its power to startle. I think that the best writers make the reviewers and introducers very violently self-conscious. When I began writing this introduction, I kept a list of words that occurred to me as I read Henri Cole's work, words like radiant and unflinching. And then when I tried to approach his work metaphorically, I found myself writing these embarrassing paragraphs about fire and transcendence. I think Henri Cole's poems confound description for two reasons. One, because they so frequently talk about the inadequacy of language to approach feeling, as in Gravity and Center when he writes, "I don't want words to sever me from reality. I don't want to need them. I want nothing to reveal feeling but feeling." And two, because his poems are so exquisitely compressed, so free of pretense, and so often cut with humor that I think anyone would feel very aware of their own tendencies toward gushiness. And by anyone, I only mean me right now. One cliche of poetry is that it reveals the profundity within so-called everyday moments. Henri Cole's poems often have titles such as Powdered Milk, Melon and Insects, Haircut, Horses, Oil and Steel, Migraine. These precise corporeal words prepare the reader for Mr. Cole's ravishing images. A dead dragonfly resembles a big broken earring, a seal muscles through the surf like a fetus, and his ruthless tonal clarity. But it is impossible to prepare for just how revelatory, unambiguously personal, and impeccably self-contained his poems are. Many of them feature people doing ordinary things, eating, lying on the grass, interacting with animals, or, as he writes in the poem, shaving, pulling a razor across my face and throat. This modest yet brutal phrase anticipates the poem's savage apex when the speaker admits, "I was rough on you. I know this because you told me, but you held up well." The speaker of Henri Cole's poem seems to have a consistent goal to torch avoidance, affectation, and self-indulgence in order to achieve objective self-examination. As he writes in the poem, Self-Portrait as Four Styles of Pompeian Wall Painting, "To become oneself is so exhausting that I am as others have made me." Paradox is often the bedrock of Henri Cole's work. These poems seem to crave abdication from the world, yet they also revel in sensual ritual. While admitting so much, they remain sealed and seamless, and it is through their commitment to absolute clarity that they obtain bottomless mystery. I read these poems like secrets and like manifestos, because they have the psychic glow of the former and the sweep and severity of the latter. As he writes in Beach Walk, "We fall, we fell, we are falling. Nothing mitigates it. The dark embryo bares its teeth, and we move on." I am deeply honored to introduce Henri Cole.
I'm deeply honored by your words, both the words of your poem, your first poems that will be in your first book, and by your words about me. Thank you very much. Thank you, Robert, for hosting the evening, and Rosanna and Louise, the faculty of the BU Creative Writing Program. I'm very honored to be here tonight. I thought what I would do is read a handful of poems from my last book, Blackbird and Wolf, and then read from my new book, which was published yesterday. Can everybody hear me okay in the back? Yeah. I like spending a part of the summer up in the Adirondacks in upstate New York, and quite a few of my poems are set up there. I think I'll begin with this poem called Twilight. Which is, well, it really has two settings. It begins up there, and then there's a sort of flashback episode in the middle of the poem, and then it comes back to a twilight event up in the Adirondacks. It's called Twilight. There's a black bear in the apple tree, and he won't come down. I can hear him panting like an athlete. I can smell the stink of his body. Come down, black bear. Can you hear me? The mind is the most interesting thing to me. Like the sudden death of the sun, it seems implausible that darkness will swallow it, or that anything is lost forever there, like a black bear in a fruit tree, gulping up sour apples with dry, sucking sounds, or like us at the pier, somber and tired, making food from sunlight, you saying a word, me saying a word, trying hard, though things were disintegrating. Still, I wanted you, your lips on my neck, your postmodern sexuality. Forlorn and anonymous, I didn't want to be that. I could hear the great barking monsters of the lower waters calling me forward. You see, my mind takes me far, but my heart dreams of return. Black bear with pale pink tongue at the center of his face is turning his head like the face of Christ from life. Shaking the apple boughs, he is stronger than I am and seems so free of passion. No fear, no pain, no tenderness. I want to be that. Come down, black bear. I want to learn the faith of the indifferent. This is a poem about my father, who grew up in the sandhills of North Carolina. His people were tenant farmers. They grew peaches and tobacco. It's called Oil and Steel. My father lived in a dirty dish mausoleum, watching a portable black and white television, reading the Encyclopedia Britannica, which he preferred to modern fiction. One by one, his schnauzers died of liver disease, except the one that guarded his corpse, found holding a tumbler of Bushmills. Dead is dead, he would say, an anti-preacher. I took a plaid shirt from the bedroom closet and some motor oil, my inheritance. Once I saw him weep in a courtroom, neglected, needing nursing. This man who never showed me much affection, but gave me a knack for solitude, which has been mostly useful. Well, let's see. Sara made reference to this poem. It is kind of an Ars statement about, Ars Poetica statement about what I aspire to. It's called Gravity and Center. After my father died, I took some of his old engineering physics books that were always impenetrable to me as a boy. And strangely, I found the graphs, some of the illustrations and graphs, quite emotional looking at them, I don't know, 30 years later or 40 years later. And one of the graphs was called Gravity and Center. I'm sorry, I cannot say I love you when you say you love me. The words, like moist fingers, appear before me full of promise, but then run away to a narrow black room that is almost dark, where they are silent, elegant, like antique gold, devouring the thing I feel. I want the force of attraction to crush the force of repulsion, and my inner and outer worlds to pierce one another like a horse whipped by a man. I don't want words to sever me from reality. I don't want to need them. I want nothing to reveal feeling but feeling, as in freedom, or the knowledge of peace in a realm beyond, or the sound of water poured in a bowl. Sara quoted this poem as well. She has good taste. It's called Beach Walk. It conflates two experiences, two encounters on a beach, and then tries to extract some knowledge from them. Beach Walk. I found a baby shark on the beach. Seagulls had eaten his eyes. His throat was bleeding. Lying on shell and sand, he looked smaller than he was. The ocean had scraped his insides clean. When I poked his stomach, darkness rose up in him like black water. Later, I saw a boy, aroused and elated, beckoning from a dune. Like me, he was alone. Something tumbled between us, not quite emotion. I could see the pink interior flesh of his eyes. I got lost. Where am I? He asked, like a debt owed to death. I was pressing my face to its spear hafts. We fall, we fell, we are falling. Nothing mitigates it. The dark embryo bares its teeth, and we move on. I think I'll stop with those and then read from my new book. This first poem is called Asleep in Jesus at Rest, which I think you published in Slate. Yeah, I thought so. Honored that Robert published on a very distinguished Slate. It's the first poem in this collection. I taught one year, not so many years ago, at Davidson College outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. I got a chance to spend time digging up my father's family in the courthouse documents there. That's a gravestone epitaph, of course, asleep in Jesus at rest. Their names were Victoria, Ebenezer, Noah, Fanny, Travis, Alex, Pleasant, William Christmas, and Jane. Like father, they labored in exchange for small wooden houses. Breaking even was a feat. Things were settled when the crops were in. They were my ancestors and lived along the Pee Dee River under Tupelo, oak, and gum. where wolves made dens. You could smell dem wolves. According to the census, they were mulatto, Spanish mulatto, small mule. Women died of uremic poisoning. Children were stillborn. Those that lived were sprinkled on their foreheads and went to Sunday school taught by Mrs. Lillian Ingram in Wolf Pit Township, North Carolina. One of them wrote a poem. There, in the boughs, in a tiny nest, are 3 baby birds with mouths opened wide. When I was born, I weighed 9 pounds of flesh. Mother's hair fell down the back of her long neck. Tears ran out of her eyes like animals. Fragrant convolutions from her insides filled the room with the strife of love. Daddy was on a tour of duty. Remember, you got a father, he used to say. You weren't born by yourself. A lot of my poems are, I guess you could say failed sonnets, or non-sonnet sonnets, or wannabe sonnets, which is to say that they're not rhymed and they're not written in iambic pentameter, but they're meant to have the fractures and leaps and resolutions in them that the sonnet form enables through the octave and the sestet, or the quatrains and the couplets. As is the case here, this poem is set in Japan, the country of my birth. I was thinking over the weekend that it was 10 years ago that I lived in Japan, and I flew back just days before 9/11, and then wasn't able really to return because everything shut down. So it's been exactly 10 years. I went back to find where my folks had lived, tried to find the hospital where I was born, and that of course didn't exist. Long ago, I lived at the foot of the mountains where my parents lived when they were young. Nearby, there was a daffodil farm, which I bicycled past each day on my way to the supermarket. Occasionally, there were earthquakes, but no one noticed. At my desk, words and phrases grew only slowly, like the embedded or basal portion of a hair, tooth, nail, or nerve. As I looked at the empty page, seeing into love, seeing into suffering, seeing into madness, my head ached so, dear reader, emotions toppling me in one direction then another. But writing this now, sometimes in a rush, sometimes after drifting thought, I feel happiness. I feel I am not alone. A whole section of this book is devoted to poems about my mother, who was a French woman who came to this country, she was 18 or 19 and spent, 60 years trying to be an American woman, and at the end of her life completely regressed. I shouldn't say regressed. She completely returned to being a French woman, only speaking French. This poem is called Mechanical Soft. I almost called my book that, Mechanical Soft. It's a reference to the chopped up food, mushy food you eat in hospice care. Mechanical Soft. Walking yesterday in the cold, bright air, I encountered 15 horses marching in a phalanx down the avenue. Long before they were visible, I heard their shoes striking the pavement, as language is sometimes audible before sense arrives. I loved how the wind played with their long, brushed tails, though in a faraway place, I was not a stranger. Mother is dying, you see, and proximity to this death makes me nostalgic for the French language. I am not a typical son, I suppose, valuing happiness, even while spooning mechanically soft pears like light vanishing into the body whose tissue once dissolved to create breast milk for me. This next poem is one long sentence. It's really a list. It's an assignment I sometimes give my students. It's called Broom. When a French friend read this book recently, she said this was the worst poem in the whole book. So I apologize in advance. She said it wasn't worthy of the book, but I like it. I do. You don't really get it until the end. You really just have to hang on, and it's a very dark poem. My friend is a very elderly woman, and I expect that had something to do, because it's a description of a body on a marble slab. So, room, a starkly lighted room with a tangy iron odor, a subterranean dankness, a metal shower head hanging from the ceiling, a scalpel, a trocar, a pump, a white marble table, a naked wrinkled body face up on a sheet, with scrubbed skin, clean nails, and shampooed hair, its mouth sewn shut with posed lips, its limbs massaged, its arteries drained, its stomach and intestines empty, a pale blue sweater, artificial pearls, lipstick and rouge, hands that once opened, closed, rolled, unrolled, re-rolled, folded, unfolded, turned and returned, as if breathing silver, unselfing themselves now, very painful. Hands that once tore open, rended, ripped, served, sewed, and stroked, very loving, pushing and budding now with all their strength as their physiognomy fills with firming fluid. Hands once raucous, sublime, quotidian, now strange, cruel, neat. Hands that once chased me gruesomely with a broom, then brushed my hair. This is another poem set up there in the Adirondacks. a lot of my poems, maybe too many, in a lot of them, maybe too many, the mind engages with an animal or a creature or a plant. And then, strives to extract some knowledge from it and then move towards some fresh idea, which is this strategy here. I took care of a flock of hens up there in the Adirondacks. One of them, strangely, was named Lazarus, and this is a poem really about Lazarus the hen. Lazarus lives with a ranger now. It's good for the ego when I call and they come running, squawking and clucking because it's feed time. And once again I can't resist picking up little Lazarus, an orange and white pullet I adore. Yes, yes, everything will be okay, I say to her glaring mongrel face. Come September, she'll begin to lay the blue-green eggs I love poached. God dooms the snake to taste nothing but the dust, and the hen to 4,000 or so ovulations. Poor Lazarus. Last spring an intruder murdered her sisters and left her garroted in the coop. There's a way the wounded light up a dark, rectangular space. Suffering becomes the universal theme. Too soft and you'll be squeezed. Too hard and you'll be broken. Even a hen knows this, posing on a manure pile, her body a stab of gold. Actually, these next two poems have that same strategy. One is called Pig, and the other one is called Hairy Spider. So, I drive a couple times a year out to Ohio where I teach, and this poem is set on the highway way out on the sort of western edge of Ohio, where I was, flying along on the highway, and there was something on, up ahead of me. It was a truck with flatbed, and there was, something perched up on this flatbed. And as I got closer, I realized it was a hog, a great big hog standing up on the flatbed, and it had a belt around its abdomen, and it was hooked up to the cabin of the flatbed. And it was an amazing sight. So that's where this poem came from, called Pig. Poor, patient pig, trying to keep his balance, that's all, upright on a flat bed ahead of me, somewhere between Pennsylvania and Ohio, enjoying the wind maybe against the tufts of hair on the tops of his ears, like a stoic at the foot of the gallows, or with his eyes heavy and glazed from caffeine and driving, like a soul disembarking, its flesh probably bacon now, tipping into split pea soup. Or, more painful to me, like a man in his middle years, struggling to remain vital and honest, while we're all just floating around, accidental-like, on a breeze. What funny thoughts slide into the head, alone on the interstate, with no place to be? This is another one set up there on that gorgeous lake in the Adirondacks called Harry Spider. I think I stole that title actually. There's a very, very scary print of a Louise Bourgeois print called Harry Spider. There's nothing like a big, long-legged spider to embody the mind's life-giving power, especially when her babies run up and stroke her face, if she has a face. Soon it will storm, and all of them will drown. Still, I love to watch their web changing, like this year's words for this year's language, not didactic, but effective, while absorbing the secret vibrations from the world. And I love it when she climbs across clear water and drags some horsefly back, like Beelzebub, to her silk coffer. There's something unsettling happening, I know, but it tests the connections between everything. Can't she see if I am climbing, I wonder, or kneeling down here on the dock, day after day, when it's time for reading and writing again, and a hairy spider, ingenious, bashful, insolent, laborious, patient, observes a man no different than a lily, a worm, a clod of clay. So all these that are left are these sonnet-length poems, just a handful more. These next ones are kind of scary. I remember standing up at Skidmore. A couple of people were here at Skidmore, and I chickened out and didn't read them, but I'm not going to do that tonight. I'm going to read them. This first one is I give the assignment to my students to write a poem of all imperatives. That's what this poem is. One animal. After my mother died, I found among her things all these little lists to herself. I guess written in unhappy moments when she would say, do not do this, do not do this, do not do this, do not do this. And that's really where this poem came from. I wrote my own do not poem. One animal. Do not show how jealous you are. Do not show how much you care. Do not think the bunch of flowers in his hand connects the hand to you. Do not close your eyes and kiss the funny lips. Do not twist your torso, touching yourself like a monkey. Do not put your mouth on the filthy place that changes everything. Do not utter the monosyllable twice that is the signature of dogdom. Do not afterward appear mangy with old breath scrutinizing every hole. And do not think touching is hair, licking, sucking, and being sucked in the same instant, no longer lonely, that you are two animals, perfect as one. Okay, this one is called Laughing Monster. I think I actually stole that title too from a Louise Bourgeois print. It was a Christmas card of all things. Um, so, laughing monster. Some people, this begins with a quotation. Some people take and some people get took. My father used to say, and I just ignored him. After all, he'd wake up and take a swig with his juice. Years later, I watch you emerge from the bathroom, breathed your fix, and wonder what it feels like, the mild euphoria, the expression of power on your face, the burst of relaxation, a little mirror to mull over the question, who am I and why? Lunging forward to assume the position so imprecise to our natures, hunting the elusive, laughing monster of contentment, my lips numb from yours. It numbs you if it's real. It numbs your throat and nose, and it numbs you inside if you put it in there, slovenly, degraded, vain. I wonder if I am the taker or being took. I think I'll read just two more here. This one is called Away, A-W-A-Y, Away. I think of it as a joyful poem. I mean, I hope it's a little more upbeat. It's at the end of the book, towards the end. If I close my eyes, I see you again in front of me, like light attracting light to itself. I'm standing in the lake, forming a whirlpool with my arms, letting the force of atonement pull me into its center until I cannot any longer hang onto my observations or any sense of myself, like dust in hydrogen clouds, getting all excited while creating new stars to light the backyard. How poignantly emptiness cries out to be filled. But writing this now, my hand is warm. The character I call myself isn't lustful, heavy, melancholic. It's as if emotions are no longer bodied. Eros isn't ripping through darkness. It's as if I'm a boy again, observing the births of two baby lambs. The world has just come into existence. And this last poem is called Swimming Hole. Swimming Hole, Buck Creek, Springfield, Ohio. I read this at the Phi Beta Kappa exercises at Harvard this spring. I read it because there's a reference to, it's a sort of flashback memory poem, and there's a reference to young boys being like buds on the cusp of existence, which seemed to me was what the graduates were. It's a short poem. Swimming Hole, Buck Creek, Springfield, Ohio. Like an echo, it comes back, the bend in the creek like a uterus's bleeding flow, tangible again as memory revisits with unusual concreteness territories of the past, rebounding, circulating, surging, vexing, panning our naked bodies, some of us in the water, loin deep, making animal sounds, some of us out, wistfully small under a depthless sky, all of us boys still, like blossoming buds, bending under the paw of some hormonal energy that lingers now in memory's tunnel, like an air prowling around us, vaguely ornery, urging, begin what you are, though not intended to belittle me for my unmasculine traits, but instead to lift me up, allowing new light to enter in, its strong, broad rays in free fall against my flesh, as if through blades of pungent grass, piercing me even deeper now to say, be kind to him, stranger that he is. Thank you.